And I'll start my talk, which is similar to what Sridevi talked about. Mine, you'll notice, is a lot more about understanding the concept of quality by design and critical quality attributes. And this is more so a important component to approach it this way because as you'll see and as I talk about it, we understand that vaccines are also biomolecules, but much more complex biomolecules than anything else that we deal with. And so therefore, it's one step at a time with regards to vaccines in terms of introducing the concepts related to quality by design and critical quality attributes. So I'll talk about those. I'll talk about some challenges related to vaccines and then get into applying QBD for vaccine development with a case study as well. So what's QBD? It's a term and a phrase that's been used for quite some time. One of the key persons associated with that phrase is Joseph Juran, a consultant, a Romanian-born consultant based in the US what his approach was that quality can be planned, and if you don't plan quality, that's when you end up in trouble. You end up with all kinds of crises and problems. And the concept of QBD is really about keeping the patient in mind, trying to understand what is it that the patient really wants, what attributes should your product have based on what the patient wants, and based on these connections, what is it that you need to, how is it that you need to run your process so that you get consistently the same product that the patient actually wants. So it's really a systematic approach to doing things. There is a lot of literature on this as we introduce this concept and try and use it more and more. There's a number of things that the FDA, the US FDA, has published on this. It was also part of Janet Woodcock's goals. There's also a number of ICH guidances all the way from Q8, Q9, Q10 that have components of QBD embedded in there. So there's a lot of emphasis to utilizing QBD approaches and thinking about quality by design. In the most simplistic fashion, what you can say is QBD is more about really understanding what you want from an output perspective, what are the variables that can come in through your inputs, through your process, and therefore what are the controls that you can introduce so that you keep your output the same. In one more level of detail, it's sort of defining what you want as your product, designing it then appropriately to meet this definition, characterizing it, understanding it more from the components that will impact what you ultimately produce, validating that over and over again. This is the point that I think Sridevi made quite well with the two examples that she talked about, and then ultimately introducing monitoring and control steps. Very busy slide, I won't go through all of it. Point is that it's a systematic but a complex set of considerations that you go through. Number of things that you consider during your pharmaceutical development stages, starting with defining what's your quality target product profile. This refers to what is it that you want to have in your product. And based on what is your target product profile, you try and define what are the critical quality attributes. You start off with what would be considered as potential CQAs, and then you try and narrow them down, you try and further refine them and confirm them as CQAs. This is then linked directly to critical process parameters, where you design to meet the CQAs that you've identified through risk management and through experimental studies. All of this really introduces things that you've learned along the way. Again, things that Sridevi sort of covered. You experimentally try and understand certain things, and some of the things you know through prior literature or through comparable molecules or through overall experience in the area. Risk management is a very important component of it. You try and understand what are the components that will need to be addressed in terms of, let's say, its raw materials, its process parameters, that will impact your ability to provide to understand these critical process parameters, to be able to control the CQAs. This therefore then leads you to understanding where are the opportunities, and this ties into defining your design space. Ultimately, you come up with a control strategy which goes into your marketing authorization, and you get your product approved. This then later on is of course part of your batch release strategy, and is also something that you need to introduce as part of continual improvement. Some of these things will be more clearer as I go through and talk about examples. This is the same exact definition that that Sridevi had, comes from ICH Q8, emphasizes risk, impact, and uncertainty. So I won't go into a lot of detail in that, but we'll spend a moment to talk about what are critical process parameters. So if we go to the same definition, same set of events, starting with your target product profile, identifying your CQAs, having a risk assessment done, then you start to define your product design space and your process design space. Product design space really will refer to how much of a window do you have between for a given attribute or for a given product quality that you want to have. And the process design space is referring to how much leeway that you have in how you run your process to still ensure that you have the same target product profile that you're meaning. You go through refinement, you go through the control strategy, process validation, process monitoring, and this essentially gives you a set of conditions where you really understand your critical process parameters, which are directly linked to your CQAs.